तस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपः कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकम्। वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरो श्रीयुतापदकमलम् श्रीगुरोन् वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातम् सहगणा रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवम् साधवैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधा कृष्णपादान् सहगणा ललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च नमो विष्णुपादाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्तस्वामिनिति नामिने। नमस्ते सारस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यदेशधारिणे नमो महावदन्याय कृष्णप्रेमप्रदायते कृष्णाय कृष्णचैतन्य नामिने वर्तते नमः। हे कृष्णा करुणा सिन्धो दीनबन्धो जगत्पते गोपेशा गोपिका कान्ता राधाकान्ता नमस्तुते तप्तकाञ्चन गौराङ्गी राजवृन्दावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये। वंशकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्येव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्णा हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। We're reading from Prabhupada's book, Let There Be a Temple, Part 2, Paris, August 9, 1973. The devotees had arranged an official city hall reception for Srila Prabhupada in the presence of the mayor of Paris and his government entourage. Srila Prabhupada said that if the government leaders do not teach the citizens genuine God consciousness, then they are not responsible leaders. Reporting this talk in the next day's paper, a news writer stated that the Swami even criticized Napoleon Bonaparte. Bhagavan, we had just moved into our new temple at 4 Rue Les Sur, Paris, and we had received 48-inch Radha and Krishna deities. Prabhupada had Pradyumna chanting the mantras and pouring the substances on the deities while Prabhupada himself looked on from his Vyasasana, giving directions. I was assisting, and at one point I turned around and saw Srila Prabhupada standing right next to me, taking the substances in his own hands and spearing them over the lotus-like face of Srimati Radharani. After the deities were installed on the altar, Srila Prabhupada came up and offered the arati, and I assisted him by handing him the articles. After the installation, we went up to Srila Prabhupada's room and very anxiously requested him to please give a name for the deities. He sat back in his chair and said that the deities will be known as Radha Parish Iswara. He then went on to say that in India, people look to London for education, look to England for education, and to Paris for sense gratification. He began to laugh and said that Krishna has come to Paris in order to get some gopis, some French girls, because the faces of the women in Paris are considered the most beautiful. Radharani is so beautiful, Prabhupada said, just like a Paris girl. And Krishna has come here to find out this most beautiful of all the gopis. So he is Parish Ishvara. Srila Prabhupada arrived in London, where he received an emergency phone call from Bombay. Giriraj wanted him to come and personally settle with Mrs. N the purchase of the Juhu land. Giriraj had consulted a new lawyer, Mr. Bakil, who felt that Prabhupada must be present there to be a settlement. Another iskcon lawyer, Mr. Chandaval, also advised that Srila Prabhupada come immediately to Bombay. Giriraj therefore had telephoned Prabhupada, begging him to please come and settle the matter with Mrs. N once and for all. Prabhupada agreed. He would remain in London until Janmashtami. Then he would return to Bombay. Bombay, September 15, 1973. The day after his arrival, Srila Prabhupada met with Mrs. N's solicitors and heard their offers. The situation had begun to look hopeful, and yet the conclusion eluded them. Mrs. N had become changed by the public reaction to her attempt to demolish the temple. If Prabhupada would pay the full balance of 12 lakhs of rupees for the land in one payment, she told the lawyer she would agree. Prabhupada was agreeable, but did not want to arrange to collect his money until he was certain that Mrs. N was actually serious. Mr. Asnani, a Bombay lawyer and iskcon life member, regularly met with Mrs. N, persuading her to cooperate with Prabhupada. Her lawyers concurred. Yet, after Prabhupada had been in Bombay for several weeks, no meeting with Mrs. N had taken place. Once Mr. Asnani went to bring Mrs. N to meet with Prabhupada, but she was not feeling well. Day after day, Mr. Asnani would tell Prabhupada, Mrs. N will come tomorrow. Prabhupada became disappointed at the procrastination, and seeing this, his secretaries told Mr. Asnani that although they knew he meant well, they were inclined to have the other lawyers handle the case. Mr. Asnani asked for another 48 hours to close the deal and execute the conveyance. Mrs. N was at her other home, where she had just recovered from her illness when Mr. Asnani visited. Mataji, he begged, my Guru Maharaj is leaving tomorrow. If you do not come tonight, the problem with the land will go on another year. Mrs. N agreed, and around 9 p.m., she and Mr. Asnani arrived at the home of Mr. Bogilal Patel, where Srila Prabhupada was holding a program of Kirtan and Bhagavad discourses. Prabhupada was on the roof preparing to lecture, but hearing that Mrs. N had arrived, he interrupted the meeting and came down to his room to talk with her. They talked briefly, and Prabhupada excused himself and returned to the roof to lecture. Around midnight, he returned to his room again, accompanied by his servant and secretary. Mrs. N was still waiting. She burst into tears and bowed at Prabhupada's feet. I am sorry for everything I have done. She sobbed, please forgive me. She promised to do whatever Prabhupada wanted. Prabhupada looked at her compassionately and understood her heart. You are just like my daughter, he said. Do not worry. I will take care of you. I'll see to all of your needs for the rest of your life. And Prabhupada said, he still accepted the very terms she had proposed, that he pay the remaining balance of 12 lakhs plus 50,000 rupees, compensation for the delay. At 6:30 on the evening of November 1, Srila Prabhupada was seated at his low desk between two windows, his back against the wall. Mrs. N and her lawyers, the registrar, Mr. Asnani, Mr. and Mrs. Sethi, and about 8 devotees were also present, and the full room grew warm and stuffy. Mrs. N sat at Prabhupada's right as the registrar prepared the papers for signing. Srila Prabhupada sat gravely. The room was silent, except for the sound of papers, rustling and a pen scratching. Preparing and signing the conveyance papers took more than 20 minutes. Prabhupada paid Mrs. N, who then signed the conveyance. The land was legally iskcon's. Giriraj. The room was hushed during the signing, and everyone felt as if a momentous event was taking place, just as if two great world powers were signing a treaty. After Mrs. N signed the document, everyone silently watched the papers being passed. She started to cry. The Krishna Goswami asked her why she was crying. Mrs. N replied that just that day Mr. Matar had come and told her he had found a buyer for the land for many more lakhs than we were paying. Actually, as we were watching Mrs. N, we were thinking that she must be remembering all the events that had taken place, the wrongs she had done, the death of her husband. It was very intense, like a combination of months of struggling. So for Prabhupada, the devotees and Prabhupada's well-wishers, their dreams and desires and efforts over the past many years were being fulfilled. Srila Prabhupada asked that the devotees inform the newspapers, and he invited everyone into the hall outside his room for a feast. Mats were rolled out in two lines, and devotees brought leaf plates and placed them in front of everyone. The devotees began serving the various dishes to the two rows of seated guests. Prabhupada was standing. Now let us start, he said, as he supervised the serving. The devotees had prepared several courses, rice, dal, many varieties of pakora, such as potato, cauliflower, and eggplant, potato sabji, papads, barfi, wet cauliflower sabji, laddus, cham cham, a milk sweet, vermicelli, kheer, halwa, and a lime drink. It was a festive and happy occasion. Mrs. Warrior, attendant on Hare Krishna land. The devotees were all saying Jai after the signing, and all of them were very happy. Then Prabhupada gave a lecture about the Bombay project. He gave an idea to all the people of how it would be all marble. Some were asking how it would be possible for everything to be marble, and Prabhupada explained that it was possible and could be done. He was visualizing the project, and everyone was thrilled to hear the way he was describing it. It would be like one of the seven wonders of the world. People would be attracted from all over to come and see it. It would be a landmark in Bombay. Prabhupada explained the whole project as if he saw it in his mind's eye. And he said that after it was constructed, it will be more than what we could visualize. It would be fantastic. After the late feast, when everyone had departed, Prabhupada returned to his room. Leaning back at his desk, he exclaimed, "It was a good find." Vrindavan, Pushakant Mataji.
Pranam Guruji. Vrindavan, March 1974. Srila Prabhupada was meditating on constructing his Krishna Balaram Mandir in April of 1972. He had asked his disciples Hans Kalaman, now Surabhi, who had drawn the plans for the Bombay Center, to execute drawings, basing the designs on Indian Renaissance architect Prabhupada liked the Govindaji temple located near the original Govindaji temple constructed by Rupa Goswami. He liked its open courtyard surrounded by many arcs and its front steps leading up to the deity's darshan area. He suggested that some features of the temples be incorporated into his temple. Surabhi, with the assistance of Vrindavana architect, execute the plan, and Prabhupada approved. This will be the grandest temple in Vrindavan. Many high-class gentlemen in Delhi who are also devotees will relish the chance to live with us on weekends, and it will be for them just like Vaikuntha. You must construct something wonderful, otherwise it will be discredit to you American boys. That will absorb the position of America and India, and Vrindavan project is one of the most important of ours in ISKCON. Although Guru Dasa had been careful to keep in touch with Prabhupada by mail, he had neglected certain important matters in Vrindavan, just as digging as well as getting city approval, things Prabhupada had repeatedly asked for. In the summer 1972, Prabhupada wrote, "From the beginning, I said I simply wanted a temple built in Vrindavan, just like Govindaji temple, and there have been so many letters, but that has not been done. Never mind. Now I like that plan of Surabhi's. To build a temple in Vrindavan should not be so difficult." Prabhupada thought that he became impatient with delays, concerned that the devotees and architect not make the buildings too costly. He said that they should go ahead with the plan he had approved. Even if the building was were to be little cheaper than in the original plan, he was concerned that a competent disciple oversee the work so that ISKCON did not get cheated. As early as April of 1972, Prabhupada has asked that the deities in Vrindavan be Krishna and Balarama. Krishna may be black, Balarama of white, and poses in the back of the Back to Godhead magazine is very nice. He asked that a sign be put out from announcing Sri Krishna Balarama Mandir. One reason Prabhupada chose Krishna and Balarama as presiding deities was the most of the Vrindavan temples were of Radha and Krishna. ISKCON's temple would be unique in Vrindavan. Another reason was that ISKCON land was located in Ramanna Reti as an area of forest and soft sands where Krishna and Balarama had enjoyed their childhood pastime 5,000 years ago. To celebrate and worship the youthful sports of Krishna and Balarama in Ramareti was fitting. Although thousands of years have passed since Krishna advent in Vrindavan, the same atmosphere and many of the same sights and sounds still prevail. Peacock ran across the sands, or sat on rooftop, or in the trees. The cooing and chirping of pigeons and cuckoos and the sweep of the parrot's green string were internal sound and sight of Vrindavan forest. In establishing a temple of Krishna and Balarama, Prabhupada wanted to offer the peaceful transcendental atmosphere of Ramanna Reti to all people, including visitors from abroad commuters from Delhi, and his own disciples. Although he had received a letter from a major international travel agency requesting that he provided accommodation for tourists so that iskcon guest house could be included in official tours of spiritual India. People were always coming to India to tour the holy place. Unfortunately, most of the places were unauthorized or overrun by cheaters. ISKCON centers, therefore, would be very important. Prabhupada wrote, have a European preaching center and try to enlist all the tourists and hippies who come to Vrindavan. Give them nice prasadam and engage them in chanting, cleaning the temple, reading our books. Give them all facilities for becoming devotees. After Prabhupada 1972 visit during Kartika, he was away from Vrindavan for more than a year, directing things through correspondence with the Krishna consciousness movement growing quickly on all continents. He had many places to visit. Still, his three major projects, Bombay, Vrindavan, and Mayapur, were his major subject of correspondence and his greatest financial investments. One day during the Massad, Prabhupada confided to his servant, most men are retired at my age. I don't want to manage anymore. I just want to do something writing. Prabhupada asked if there was some place in the world he could go for 6 months, a place where he would be all alone, where no one would come to disturb him, and where he would not get any mail. Prabhupada's servant suggested Tehran. Prabhupada considered it, then suggested New Vrindavan. He spoke of Mohandas Gandhi, who could not even sleep at night because people are always after him, even though he travels incognito. That very day, a letter came from Bhagwan in Paris inviting Prabhupada to tour his ISKCON center in Europe. Immediately, Prabhupada was at this invitation. He said he would go. But earlier today, his servant said he wanted to go away, be alone. Prabhupada laughed. That will not be possible for me in this lifetime. Better I keep traveling and die on the battlefield. For a warrior, it's glorious to die on the battlefield. Is it not?
Thank you,
Guru
Mataji.
Hare Krishna.
Madhumati Mataji.
Hare Krishna, Dhanvat Pranam, Prabhuji. Guru Dasa had sent a letter to all ISKCON centers inviting devotees to attend the opening of the Krishna Balram Mandir in Vrindavan. He had invited live members from Bombay and Calcutta and had reserved cars for them on the trains. Prabhupada also was inviting his disciples to come to Vrindavan for Janmashtami. Lecturing before hundreds of devotees in Los Angeles, he said, I invite all of you to come to Vrindavan to the opening of Krishna Balram Mandir. Prabhupada had also mailed invitations to his godbrothers, and when one of them accepted the invitation, Srila Prabhupada replied, assuring him of accommodation and suggesting the easiest way to travel from Calcutta to Vrindavan. On July 15th, only 10 days before Prabhupada's proposed arrival in Vrindavan, he wrote almost identical letters to his sannyasi disciples, inviting them to come and resolve the many personal matters and items of business that had been pending during his busy tour. Except for Guru Dasa, however, none of the devotees in Vrindavan thought that the building would be ready for the scheduled grand opening. Work was going on slowly, as usual, and except for the deity hall area, the land was still a construction site. There were no altars, no deities. They just thought Guru Dasa so feared displeasing Prabhupada that he could not bear to admit that the building would not be ready. The date had been set, and Prabhupada did not want excuses. It has to be done by Janmashtami, he wrote. There is no question of delay. Guru Dasa admitted that the temple construction wouldn't be finished by Janmashtami, but he reasoned that the opening ceremony could still take place even if the final touches of the temple weren't done. Because there was no regular GBC secretary for India, Prabhupada did not receive accurate reports on the Vrindavan temple construction. Several months later, Tamala Krishna Goswami had left his position as GBC secretary for India and had gone to preach in the West. 3 months had passed before Prabhupada had appointed a replacement, Karandhara, but now, after a few weeks, Karandhara was resigning. Guru Dasa's version, therefore, was the only one Prabhupada had received. The end of July grew near, and the devotees prepared to travel to Vrindavan for a fiasco. Vrindavan, August 4, 1974. When Prabhupada's car pulled up at iskcon's property in Ramanareti, a group of devotees greeted him with kirtana and flowers. Some 25 devotees from temples around the world had already gathered for the grand opening celebration, and along with Vrindavan devotees, they crowded happily around Srila Prabhupada. No formal walkways had been constructed, and Prabhupada walked through the half-constructed walls, past piles of sand and bricks, making his way towards the deity house. Even here, the lack of ornamentation and finishing was apparent, and rubble lay all around. What is this? Prabhupada demanded as he toured the construction site. There is nothing here. Where is the temple? You told me the temple was finished. Gurudasa, Surabhi, Guru Nava, and others directly responsible were unstable to answer. Their faces went white. Prabhupada was furious. How can you open this? The visiting devotees also began speaking among themselves. It is not ready. How can we open? Let there be a temple, part 2. But Prabhupada said one devotee, devotees all over the world are coming. Stop them immediately, Prabhupada said. There will be no opening. Prabhupada had burst the bubble, the illusion that they would be ready for the grand opening. Prabhupada's anger was frightening, and the devotees who surrounded him were no longer carefree and joyful. You were going to open this temple, Prabhupada scoffed. The altar is ready, said Rishikesha, who had come from Japan to attend the opening. We can install the deity, and you cannot open the temple, Prabhupada shouted. This temple is not completed. Prabhupada then walked into his house, followed by the Vrindavan managers and a few other leaders. However, could keep his distance from Srila Prabhupada in this mood, considered himself spared. Shrubi's wife ran off to pray to Krishna, afraid of Srila Prabhupada's ferocity. In this room, Prabhupada's anger only increased. He yelled at Guru Dasa for mismanagement. He yelled at Surabhi. He yelled at all of them. No one dared to offer suggestions or excuses. There was nothing to do but turn white and become depressed. Prabhupada suddenly inquired whether the temple could be opened despite the mess. Can you give the deity room ready at least? He turned to Shurabhi. This is an insult to our society. What will people think? We have announced it everywhere. Nobody actually knows about it, Srila Prabhupada. Shurabhi replied fearfully, exposing himself for another blast. Oh, Prabhupada somewhat changed his tone. You have not made any propaganda about it? No invitations? Not yet, Prabhupada. Not to people in Vrindavan. They do not expect it to open because everyone who has been here can see that it is not possible to open. They know it's not ready. This is a farce, Prabhupada scowled. It is a fiasco. Disgusted, he looked at the Vrindavan managers. We have to open. How can we open on Janmashtami? Srila Prabhupada, Shirobhi said, the doors are not ready. They are still cutting the wood. Prabhupada inquired from the deities from Yamuna, who explained that their paraphernalia had been purchased, but the thorns were not ready. What is your opinion? He asked her. I'm totally unqualified to speak, Yamuna said, and although I have no rights to speak, I see it as almost impossible to actually open the temple. There is no pujari. With a sense of finality and failure, Srila Prabhupada said, then we won't do it. But we have invited so many people around from all around the world to come, and I was not informed of this. Now, You all decide. When can we open? Prabhupada asked. Can we open on Diwali? October, Srila Prabhupada. How about Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's appearance day? A devotee suggested. That's the end of December. Prabhupada was silent, looking displeased. Shirabhi spoke up. It will take 6, actually 7 months. Then Prabhupada chose the day of Ram Navami in April. The opening could coincide with the annual gathering of devotees in Mayapur and Vrindavan. Ultimately, Prabhupada's anger with his disciple was incidental. The reaction due them for their foolishness. It was also a way of instructing them and testing them. But deeper was Prabhupada's transcendental impatience and frustrations that his devotional service in Vrindavan was still not manifested. He wanted a wonderful temple for the glory of Krishna consciousness movement, a temple that would establish Krishna consciousness all over the world. It was an offering to his spiritual master, and he has promised it to Krishna, but still it was not complete. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Mataji. Aryan Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Danat Pranam. As for Prabhupada's disciple, failure to do the job, Prabhupada had to take the burden and the agony of that failure. His disciples were his instruments in his service to Krishna. If the instruments didn't work properly, then he suffered, just as when one's arms and legs fail to function, the whole body suffers. His disciples' failure to carry out his desire was his loss. In this way, he felt transcendental lamentation over their failure to open the Krishna Balram Mandir on Janmashtami day. Prabhupada's disturbance, though transcendental, was nonetheless real. It was not feigned merely for instructing, nor could the devotees cheaply cheer up their spiritual master for Prabhupada's disciple to uh, properly assist him. They would have to understand his transcendental mood and serve him accordingly. Prabhupada wanted practical down to earth service from his disciples. They should not accept to serve him sentimentally but should work hard. Devotional service was dynamic. Prabhupada wanted his disciples to help him with the projects to serve his Guru Maharaja. Projects which, if successful, could save the world from misery. Getting concrete was a big problem. Surbi, Gunarvana, Tejas, and others were always meditating and striving. How to get cement, yet it seemed no cement was available in the whole of India, as month after month they waited for the government permission. Daily, since Prabhupada's arrival, for the so called temple opening, the devotees had been traveling by bus and rickshaw to Mathura to see if cement, even a few bags, was available. Sometimes they were cheated. One shipment of 20 bags had been cut with other materials, and when they used it in casing a column, it remained soft for 4 days and finally crumbled. When at last enough cement arrived to complete the work, the devotees felt sure it had happened only because of Srila Prabhupada's presence. Prabhupada and Gunarnava could count every bag of cement as it arrived. From 8 in the morning until 9:30 at night, the shipment kept coming on trucks, each truck with 4 coolies to carry the heavy bags on their backs into the storage shed. Gunarnava stood outside all day with pad and pen, marking the receipt of each bag. Srila Prabhupada came out of the house several times and watched gravely. In the evening, when they were finished, he called Gunarva in. So, how many bags? Prabhupada asked, and Gunarva gave the exact figure. Everything is locked away now? Prabhupada asked. Yes, Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada talked about the cement as if talking about a shipment of gold. During February and March of 1975, Srila Prabhupada toured widely again, traveling eastward via Tokyo and Hawaii to Los Angeles. While traveling, he received word that Governor Reddy had accepted the invitation to attend the Vrindavana temple opening on Ram Navami. He also received an encouraging report from Surbi assuring him that this time the opening would definitely take place. I am encouraged that you accept to have everything completed on time. Prabhupada wrote, This I want. Next, Prabhupada traveled to Mexico City, Mexico and Syracuse, Venezuela. He continued traveling quickly, stopping in Miami, Atlanta, Dallas, and New York, all within a month of his departure from India. He then went to London, stopped in Tehran, and returned to India on March 16. It was Prabhupada's eighth trip around the world in 10 years. Mayapur, March 23, 1975. For this year's festival, almost 500 devotees from around the world had gathered, and Prabhupada, while taking his morning walks in the nearby fields, while entering the temple of Radha Madhava, or while lecturing from the Chaitanya Charitamrita, was a central attractive feature. Each morning after giving the class, he would circumambulate the temple room, followed by his disciples. A brass bell hung from the ceiling on either side of the deity's altar, and Prabhupada, while circumambulating the deities, would go up to one of the bells and ring it several times, pulling the rope while the kirtana continued widely. Then, with cane in hand, he would walk around the back of the deity altar and emerge on the other side to ring the other bell. The devotees would jump the devotees would jump and down close around him, singing Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Smiling with great pleasure, Prabhupada would continue the length of the temple room to the first bell again and strongly ring it. After half a dozen such blissful circumambulations, he would leave the temple while the kirtana continued to roar. Coming out in the bright morning sunshine, he would walk up to the broad staircase to his room. Prabhupada again supervised the annual meeting of his governing body commission and personally approved or modified all their decisions. ISKCON was indeed growing, but as Prabhupada had told his friend, the aged Gopalacharya in Madras, Krishna and Krishna's institution are not non-different. If the devotees are thinking of Krishna's institution, they will not forget Krishna. By insisting on the devotees' participation in the annual Indian pilgrimage, Prabhupada was solidifying the spiritual basis of ISKCON. His transcendental institution, to gather his devotees like this was the reason he had prayed and struggled to erect centers in the Dhams. He wanted to extend the purifying shelter of Mayapur and Vrindavan to all his followers. Now, in the future, bit by bit, the plan was coming together. The whole world was being saved by Lord Chaitanya's movement. Vrindavan, April 16. When Srila Prabhupada arrived to finally conduct the Krishna Balram Mandir opening, he was pleasantly surprised to see the three tall domes rising over the temple. The domes had been constructed entirely during the 8 months since his last visit. The four-story international guest house had also been completely built during his absence. Surbi had supervised workers in day and night shifts to get everything done on time. The tall central dome and two side domes, one over each altar, were magnificent. Their graceful form led the mind to higher thoughts and suggested an existence beyond the material world. The strength and beauty of the domes reminded one that beneath resided the deity of the Supreme Lord. A temple was to enlighten people, to remove their innocence, and the domes eloquently spoke of this purpose. They could be seen for miles, rising boldly above the landscape of Vrindavana, proclaiming the worship of Krishna and Balram.
Thank
Each
you.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Leelanandani Rukmini Mataji.
Krishna Prabhuji Dandat Pranam. Prabhupada representing the lower, middle, and higher planets, and at the top, the eternal Sudarshana Chakra, the spinning wheel, weapon of Lord Vishnu. The Sudarshana Chakra was Krishna himself, and just to see the glorious symbol atop the Mandira made the devotees feel victorious and satisfied. Even the guests could not help but regard it as with awe. Atop the Sudarshana Chakras were copper victory flags. As Prabhupada toured the complete building, he continually looked up at the domes. Oh, he said, the domes have come out very nice. What do you think? He returned to the devotees accompanying him. They are magnificent, said one devotee. Yes, Prabhupada smiled. Everyone is telling how nice Surabhi is doing. Prabhupada turned and told who had gone. Prabhuji, please scroll it down. Prabhupada smiled. Everyone is telling how nice Surabhi is doing. Prabhupada turned to Surabhi, who had gone with little asleep for weeks. But I can't say that. Only me. I am criticizing you because that is my job. I have to always criticize the disciple. No less than 600 devotees from iskcon centers around the world had come to Vrindavana as part of the annual Indian pilgrimage. The high point was to be the installation of the deities and the opening of the temple. Final preparations were going on furiously, cleanups, decorations, cooking. Many important life members and guests had come and were staying in their private rooms in the 40-room guest house. Prabhupada's vision had finally come to pass. He had created probably the most beautiful and opulent temple in Vrindavana, certainly the one most alive with dynamic devotion and preaching spirit, and along with it had built one of the best local hotels for visitors with an eye Prabhuji, with an eye for Krishna Bhakti. Touring the grounds, Prabhupada walked into the sunken courtyard, its marble floor clean and dazzling. This was no rented house in America, something built for another purpose. It was a temple like the temples in Vaikunta described in the Srimad Bhagavatam. It is heaven on earth, Prabhupada said. I think it surpasses all the temples in India. Prabhupada stood smiling before the Tamila tree, its venerable branches spread throughout one corner of the courtyard, and he recounted how there had been a discussion of cutting it down, and he had prevented it. Tamila trees are associated with the pastimes of Let There Be Temple Part 2. Srimati Radharani and are very rare. In Vrindavana, there were perhaps only three, one here, one at Sevakunja, and one in the courtyard of the Radha Damodara temple. That the Tamila tree was growing so luxuriantly, Prabhupada said, indicated that the devotees were performing genuine bhakti. Convinced that the temple was actually ready, Prabhupada entered his residence just between the temple and the guest house. Many details demanded his attention, and many visiting disciples were present. Thus, in Raman Reti, in a place where there was no temple, a pure devotee desired, let there be a temple and seva, devotional service. And what had once been an empty lot was now a place of pilgrimage. Such is the power of the desires of pure devotees.
All right, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Let's stop here. The new chapter will start in the next class.